Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Craig Corbett, and I work for a company called Publicize, and we are trying to change the way that startups approach PR. I'm also chairman for a publication called 150sec.com, which is a tech and innovation blog which is focused specifically on the CEE region. So, I've seen PR from both sides. I've worked as a journalist in the past. I've worked with hundreds of startups trying to develop PR campaigns. And also I've worked as an editor and a chairman for publications. So I've seen the challenges which early stage startups have when they try to get media attention. So today what we're going to be thinking about is how can startups build media campaigns and PR campaigns which really help them to grow their company? How can we actually meet our company goals through PR? And how can we create really interesting narratives and stories which allow us to do so? So, as a company, we believe that traditional PR is broken for startups. When I say traditional PR, I mean sending out press releases with company announcements like new offices or company launches or product updates, etc., or kind of brand management, etc. These things were designed for large companies. Large companies, large multinational companies, they already have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of stakeholders around the world. People know their brand name. You've heard of them before, whether it's LG or BMW or Siemens. These are household names. As such, these companies can send out press releases to the press about little things like new offices or etc., and they pick them up. They listen to them. Also, traditional PR is priced for large companies. A lot of the big PR brands are still charging $10,000+ per month, 6-month retainers, etc. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know very many early stage startups that can afford to pay $10,000 a month for PR. It just doesn't happen. Okay, as I mentioned as well, this type of traditional PR is very announcement based. If a big company like BMW does something quite small, as I said, they just send out a press release and it gets covered. Startups inherently have less announcements. If you look at the product map for an early stage startup, they've probably only got 1 or maybe 2 announcements in 1 year. As such, we need to start thinking about different narratives, different types of stories that we can create, which make startups more interesting. Okay, so fast forward to 2009. Where are we today? 2019, sorry. Where are we today? It's a lot more competitive. Nowadays, they estimate there's 100 million new businesses launched each year. Now, of course, not all of these are startups, but there's a lot of competition. There's millions of startups around the world, and all of these startups want to be published on the same media publications. All of them, to a T, want to get on TechCrunch. Okay? We're also in the middle of a media downturn. The news going digital really screwed with the big publishers. It really screwed, even the New York Times, one of the biggest brands in the world, has consistently had to cut its newsroom over the years. There are now less journalists trying to cover more and more stories. But at the same time, the new digital landscape has also created opportunities. In the past 20 years ago, there was maybe 20 or 30 publications that you wanted to target. Now there are hundreds. From up-and-coming blogs to different channels like YouTube, podcasts, etc. There's now a lot more options for startups to actually get some media coverage. But finally, the last point, which for us is the most important, is startups need to use PR to meet their business aims. Startups cannot afford to spend $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a month and get no clear ROI. They need to scale their companies. They need to see that they're actually getting direct gains from doing these things. So, we call this PR for growth. This is what we think the new PR should be for startups. So what does this mean? It's a long-term strategic approach to PR which takes in all of your company objectives. So, what could these company objectives be? These could be things like raising funding. They could be hiring developers, which is increasingly hard today. Or it could just be growing your user base, getting more people to actually use your app or your service. Nowadays, we have the benefit of being able to use metrics and analytics. 20 years ago, if you got a big media result on the New York Times, it was quite difficult for you to actually say, this is the ROI we got from that, because it wasn't online. Nowadays, we can follow everything with data. For every single marketing and PR campaign you do, you can actually directly see how much ROI, how many leads, how much traffic you're generating with these stories. As such, it's more accessible to startups. So, PR for Growth for us is a template designed for startups to build a narrative, legitimacy, brand awareness, and a customer base through effective media coverage. So what's the first step? So often, we get startups coming to us, and they've got amazing ideas, they've got really cool products, but all they say to us is, we want to get on Wired, we want to get on Mashable, we want to get on TechCrunch. But the fact is, if you actually break it down, what does it mean? To get on TechCrunch, to get on Wired, what is the actual business aim there? The business aim is actually to grow your user base or your customer base. So when we break it down like that, when we actually create a really clear aim, it makes it easier for us to make achievable goals for startups, instead of just trying to get these big hitter results, which you probably aren't going to get, realistically. So if we say we want to grow our customer base, what can we do to get there? We need to raise our credibility. Now, anyone could go home today, design a website, make a LinkedIn page, call themselves a CEO and founder, and you have a startup. Well, online you have a startup. As such, people are inherently suspicious. They don't always trust you. When you say I'm a startup founder, it doesn't mean anything. They have to be able to go online and find multiple sources which show them that you're the real deal. So we need to improve our credibility. Now, we could do this through earned media. This is kind of what we're talking about with these big results on big media channels like the Next Web, etc. We could also do it through other ways, though, as well, like applying for awards, doing startup pitch competitions. These are also other ways to meet those aims. We could be providing thought leadership content. These are non-promotional articles which still let you show that you're an expert within your field. Or we could be going on podcasts. We could be getting involved in events. These are all different ways to improve your credibility, which don't include you pitching to TechCrunch. Also, awareness. If you want to grow your user base, effectively what you're saying is you want more people to look at your startup, to know what you're doing. So you could just go down the earned media route, or you could also use new platforms like Product Hunt, Beta List, Startup Ranking. These are all really good ways to put yourself in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other startup people, investors, the media, etc. And also nowadays, in the age of Google, SEO is super important. If you want to improve your visibility, you need to improve your ranking. So this means you need to be creating interesting narratives, interesting content, which fits in with Google's guidelines so you can improve your SEO over time. So it doesn't have to be to grow your user base. It could be to bring on investors, etc. It doesn't matter what your business goal is. You need to tie this into your PR goals too. As I said, people often come to us and their first step, because they've raised a little bit of funding or they've got a cool tool, is to go straight to the top. They think they can go straight to TechCrunch. But realistically, you need to pass the other stages before you get there. You need to put yourself on the radar of TechCrunch somehow. The first thing is, for me, is always housekeeping. For example, I was speaking to a really interesting guy from a startup from Israel last night. He had an amazing product. Really, it blew me away. But then when I got home and I tried to go to his website, the website didn't work. You need to do the first stuff. If you want to get on the radar of the press, you need to be prepared to do so. This means your website needs to be really cool. You have to have a blog. You have to be on social media. You have to be on Crunchbase, LinkedIn. These are all the things you need to start with first. Then, as I mentioned, you could be doing things like SEO, podcasts. Then, when you've kind of raised your head a bit, you can move on to the next thing, the next stage, when people already know who you are. You could be doing guest submissions, events, and targeting up-and-coming media. For example, you guys are from Latvia. You've got a lot more chance of getting on 150 SEC or tech.eu or EU startups than you do of getting on Mashable, for example. So why not get a base of media results first, and then when people already know who you are, then you can target the big hitters. So now you've got your business goal. You know what you want to do. Now the next step is to develop your narrative. So how are you going to do this? The fact is, as an early stage startup, no one really cares that much about your product. You have to make them interested in you in a different way. It could be with a fascinating backstory, showing them what you've done to get to where you are today. It could be by giving a deep and personal connection, by showing different parts of your company, your culture, your backstory. Or it could be presenting yourself as an industry old hand. This means showing people that you know more than other people in your industry, sharing data, sharing research, etc. Nowadays, to break through the noise, you have to find a hook. Your product, your algorithms is not enough. Nowadays, people think because they use AI or Internet of Things and all these sexy technologies that journalists are going to run to cover them. But the fact is, when you go to a conference like this, you meet hundreds of people that are all using AI. So you need to do something else to stick out. For me, the first step is stop selling, start storytelling. Your product's super important, but more often than not, the reason why you founded your company, your big mission, the problem which you aim to solve for millions of people around the world, is a lot more engaging. So think about the reason you founded your company. Think about the problem you want to solve and blow it up, amplify it. For example, back in 2013, when our founders, Conrad and Eddie, set up Espacio, they set up Espacio, a co-working space in Medellin. Now, a co-working space is quite possibly the least newsworthy announcement anyway. Anyone can do it. Get a big room, get some internet, get some nerds, and you're good to go. It's not worthy for TechCrunch. But what these guys did was they tied into a bigger story. Medellin is known for Pablo Escobar, violence, etc. But in the last 10 years, it's had lots of changes. It's been voted as a city of innovation. It's got startups. So what they did was they tied it into a bigger theme, which was that they wanted to make Medellin the Silicon Valley of Latin America. That was the story that got them on TechCrunch. So Jonathan Greachin from the Founder Institute gave me a really good tip. He said, force yourself to start your pitch with phrases like there are, today, since 2009, and you'll effectively start pitching a larger cause that makes your company relevant, rather than beating your chest about how awesome you are. So for example, you could say, today there are 3 million Audi drivers in Germany, or since 2009, 40% of women have struggled in this industry. You need to kind of show people why what you're talking about is important. Now, you don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to be colonizing Mars to save humanity. You could be solving another problem which is still important for lots of people, like improving access to university, making it easier to do your taxes, making the roads safer, reducing CO2 emissions. The point is to tie into themes which make you important to millions of people, not just people that are interested in your technology. Next, when you're trying to create an interesting story, your team is your most important resource. For a long time, this was the tech world. Lots of young, middle-class, well-educated guys. Now, luckily, thankfully, over time, email, or say that you and your co-founder never went to university, or you started your startup in the back of a car. These are all things you should be sharing. There are differences about you. For example, if you're from Latvia, if you're from Lithuania or Estonia, for me, that makes you inherently more interesting than someone from Silicon Valley because you're different. It's a different part to your story. Or maybe your team is pretty normal, but maybe your journey to where you are today is different. For example, this guy who went to rural India to try out his prototype for a washing machine, or this guy who started a company in his parents' basement. These are engaging, motivating stories for other entrepreneurs, and this is exactly the sort of stuff that the media is looking for. Or maybe take a look at your company culture. Mike McDermott, who's the CEO of FreshBooks, told me a really good hack. He said, company culture is the one thing you can have 100% control over. You can be as zany and bizarre as you want. You need to make yourself interesting at all costs. Now, you could go down the zany, interesting route and ask all your employees to get tattoos of your logo on their faces, but it might make it a little bit intimidating for VCs and future employees. So instead, you could go around the more organic route. Look at why your employees love working for you and why your customers love your service and see if you're doing something different. Sometimes it's the weirdest things which get people coverage on big publications. For example, these guys got on the Harvard Business Review for serving breakfast to their employees. These guys got on Fast Company for creating a system whereby people can give feedback. And they got on Fortune for paying for their employees' weddings. It's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. It ties into your company values, and it's all part of your story. Finally, practice what you preach. Now, we're living in a time where every day you open up the news and you see negativity. Whether it's Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump or Brexit, there's always bad news. Social responsibility and transparency are big selling points right now. In the negative world of fake news, people are looking for companies they can trust. The media are looking for positive stories. They're looking for companies that are giving something back. So what does this mean? Does this mean you have to set up an NGO? Well, no, but you should. You should be trying to help people. The point is, give back to communities as much as possible, and this is another reason you could get coverage. This could be hiring from different demographics. It could be giving people a chance that don't normally have it. It could be partnering with NGOs or other organizations. These are all cool, interesting stories. For example, these guys, Drops, they're a Hungarian company who wanted to create a tool to protect their national language, which less people are using again. They decided to put native Hawaiian, which is known as a dying language, on their app. This got them a great amount of coverage, but also it doubled their downloads. Okay, but it's a nice story. We've done stuff like this in the past. For example, we realized that the media is in trouble. Journalists are struggling to make a decent income. So what we did was we set up a reporter in residence program in which we would pay reporters to come and help us train our staff. They weren't working directly with our clients. They were helping us to become better writers. They were improving our editorial team. Also, we know that most early-stage startups can't afford to pay for PR. So we set up a free platform called Publicize Zero. We'll be launching Generation 2 later this year. These are nice stories. They got us on TechCrunch and Forbes. So now you've got a cool story, what next? You need to identify the right influencers for your story. This means not just chucking them out to all the big hitters immediately. Think about, what are you trying to achieve with your PR strategy? Who do you need to reach to achieve these goals? What media do they consume? And who are the influencers operating within this media that are most relevant to your brand and your message? When you actually break it down like this, if you're trying to reach VCs, why not target the publications which they're actually reading? If you're trying to reach developers, why not try and get an article on Hacker News? That's going to get you a lot closer to lots of developers than Forbes will, for example. It's about being strategic in your PR plans. Next, you need to start the conversation. Just sending out press releases if no one knows who you are probably isn't going to work. I always say you should give more than you take when you work with journalists. This means offering them something. And when I say offering them something, I don't mean a big bundle of cash, because that's definitely not going to work. I mean offer them information, offer them access, offer them white papers, data, invite them to events. If you're offering them something, they're a lot more likely to grab their interest. Also, you've got sites like Harrow, helpareporterout.com. Everyone should be checking that daily. This is a site where journalists can post requests for information. So for example, if you're a fintech company and they're looking for information about fintech companies, you've already got your connection. Also, engage on social media. If you follow journalists who cover your beat and you see they've released an article, why not leave a comment? Not just saying, great article, bro, but saying something which is actually useful, like, hey, I really loved your opinions on this, but have you considered this? Or send them data, refer them other startups. This is how you should be engaging with journalists. Also, go to events. Events, for me, are the best places to meet journalists. If you start speaking, if you start getting involved, people are naturally going to notice who you are. And media monitoring. If you want to create interesting narratives, you need to know what the existing narratives are. You need to know what other people are speaking about too. So every single morning, startups should be checking the news to see what's going on in their industry. Okay. So, to wrap things up, you need to earn that media. As a startup, no one owes you any favors. No one is dying to cover your story. You need to convince them that you're really interesting. This means creating a PR strategy which is constantly moving. This means tying in your business goals, tying them in with current events and industry news, and also mixing that in with your own company announcements, which are important. Okay, so that's a lot of information to consume. Thanks for your time, everyone. If anyone's interested, we've got some free PR resources on our website. Go to publicize.co/resource center. And if anyone wants to speak to one of our PR experts and run through their stories, etc., you can go to publicize.co/PR assessment. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. So we have time for questions, and who would like to ask Craig a question about his startup or PR for his startup?
On the back.
Right there. There's a catch box coming towards you.
Great talk. Thank you. Great talk. Quick question. Influencer marketing. Now with I think there's a new law or there's a new policy being put in place where influencer marketers have to be more transparent and say that it is a paid advert. How do you think that will impact the influencer marketing strategy? How authentic will it be?
I mean, to be honest, when you do PR and marketing, you've got your three different areas. You've got earned, which is what we were just talking about. You've got owned, which is your own channels, like your blog or your social media. And then you've got paid, which is what you're talking about. So this could be sponsored content. This could be paying for influencers to mention your brand, etc. Personally, as someone that works with the media, I personally think that there should be regulations. I think that if it's a sponsored post, it's better to be transparent and say that you are sponsoring it. That forces brands to actually create interesting sponsored content rather than just kind of plastering their name out all over the place. To be honest, we don't actually really work with influencer marketers that much, but for me, as someone that works in the media, I honestly feel that transparency is better than trying to pull the wool over the consumer's eyes. I hope that answers somewhat your question.
Okay, another question from the audience. Come on, guys. As I said, you are here for a reason. He's an opportunity for you to get more insights in your startup PR. Who was here with the startup? I saw a few hands before. Yeah, you have one, yeah, in front. So you must have a question, how to get more PR.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, here.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you for the speech. And what about the storytelling? How to brand your startup or yourself, making a storytelling? How you actually find out the niche, not the niche, but how to wrap up and tell the storytelling? Because we're doing with our startup, we're doing this, but it doesn't work. And how we can get interest for the audience?
I mean, startup storytelling is different for every single startup. I think it's not easy. Getting PR coverage now is not easy, that's the point. But the thing is that you need to be thinking about different narratives that you can create about your startup and constantly trying new ones. You need to be looking at what other companies are talking about and taking inspiration from that as well. When we talk about storytelling, it's like, I don't know what your industry is, so it's quite hard for me to say. But
What is your industry?
And online marketing. It's online marketing and
Okay.
also food trucks, like traditional business that
Food trucks and online marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, tough.
right. Well, for me, that sounds like a pretty different company, you know. Not everyone can say that. So already, you know, the point is find the reasons that you're different to your competitors rather than just kind of telling the same stories. It's about taking a step back and looking at all these different aspects that we're talking about. Think about why you founded the company, look at your company culture, your team, look at the different ways that you interact with your users. You know, are there stories there? If not, try and look at the actual work you're doing. Look at the data that you're creating. Look at the work you've done with previous clients before and see if you can find any stories there. There's no silver bullet answer for startup storytelling. The point is just to look a little bit deeper at what you're doing and why you're doing it and see what stories there are there.
And would you say that a content should be created and then directly brought to the media, the press, or which channel would be best to distribute this content so it gets caught by
all of the
eyes?
channels?
All
Like,
the
this is the
channels.
thing. Is
Which are the all,
so
in your opinion?
So nowadays, as I said, we need to be focusing on all three at the same time. Earned, owned, and paid, all at the same time. So you should be creating interesting blogs and putting them out in social media. You should be putting them on LinkedIn. You should be putting them on Medium and other sites like this. So that's your owned channels, effectively. You should also consider sponsored content, like what he's talking about. With sponsored content, you have a lot more leeway to tell your own stories because you're actually paying for it, effectively. And then also, you know, like all the other channels like earned media. If you're pitching TechCrunch all the time and they're not listening to you, then find out who the local bloggers are. Find out who your local media channels are and start a conversation with them. As I said, they're a lot more likely to actually answer your emails, to speak to you at events, to get back to you, basically. So the point is that nowadays, startups cannot just focus on one channel. We need to be doing a whole range of things from start to finish. And over time, this is an accumulative thing. Media coverage generally duplicates itself. If in your first year you get one media result, that puts you out there. So the chances are that in your second year, you'll get 2 or 3 media results. It's about constantly trying to create new stories and putting yourself out there on the right channels.
Yeah, I think now it's a tough job for startup teams that there's so many channels. You could create so much information. How much of your time, in your opinion, of let's say 8 hours a day, how much of my time should I devote to self-promotion?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think CEOs and founders are always going to reach a stage where they need someone that they're focusing all of their energy on this. You know, whether this is bringing on a marketing intern, whether this is just, you know, setting a certain amount of hours per week where you're going to focus on this. Because, as I said, it's not just creating press releases, it's also monitoring the news, seeing what's actually happening in your industry, seeing what your competitors are doing, seeing where the industry is advancing. This is all the information that actually allows you to build your story. Like, you have to tie into real things. When you contact a journalist, you have to contact them for a reason. You can't just contact them and say, hey, we're here, we're amazing. For example, if you want to talk about your company culture, you need to look for the journalists that have been writing about that in the past. You need to know who's writing about that. That means doing your research. It means spending half an hour each day actually checking all these industry publications, checking social media, checking all these different channels to try and find out what are the best things to talk about right now.
Yeah, it's tough for Latvians because we are so shy and kind of introverted to go out and publicly speak about ourselves. All right, guys, so we have one more question, so let's go there at the back.
Hi, thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
I work in the impact space, and do you see a difference in the way impact startups communicate to like more regular tech startups? And do you have some tips?
Sorry, I didn't hear, you work in what space?
The impact space, so with social entrepreneurs, green entrepreneurs.
Okay, well, I mean, kind of what I was talking about here, but giving something back. Like, I would say that you already have an advantage there in the fact that you're working in a space which generally people want to write about. If you're doing something which is really interesting, you should be checking which journalists are generally writing about these themes. And if you're doing something which is showing results and you can show that, hey, we're making a real difference in the world, you know, I would think that it would be a little bit easier because there's going to be very specific journalists which write about these themes. There's also a bunch of different publications which focus specifically on these themes. I can't come up with them off the top of my head, but if you want to speak to me afterwards, I can pass them to you at another time. But yeah, I would say, you know, these are the sorts of stories which people want to be writing about. If you can create the data which shows that you're really making an impact on certain communities, I would say that ideally, in an ideal world, these are the sorts of stories which should be getting written about. So just keep on trying. I think that's the thing. Keep on trying. As long as you're doing something great, then over time, someone's going to take notice. And if not, we have 10 different publications in our network, and we would love to write about you. So come and speak to me afterwards, and I'll give you my card.
Awesome. We are out of time for questions. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
And we're going to...